Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast,
a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Aniston, and this is Empowered Life. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Riekstins. I'm your host, and I'm excited to kick off today's episode because we're always speaking about how life is serving the person that you get to become. And this is another example of what does it look like to take your pain and to turn pain into your purpose. And, not only to do it with the intent of building a life of joy, fulfillment, and freedom, but doing it in the pursuit of other people's happiness. Today's guest, Michael Chernow, is an incredible human being. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a podcast host. He's an expert in wellness, fitness, nutrition. And on top of that, he's also a restaurateur. And if that wasn't enough, the guy's a phenomenal coach, creating impact, sharing what was his painting and turning it into his passion and purpose. So I just want to start off today by saying, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We're just so honored and privileged to have you here today. I'm excited to take your story and use it to support somebody that's going through something similar to the experience that you've had, giving the example of what's possible when you do the work. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So, Michael, I want you to give us a little bit of context as to what was your story. Every single person listening to this episode is either in the process right now, the throes of going through something in their life, or they've gone through something, or for many people are about to go through something. And I always find there's so much value in looking at what has been somebody's story. I know that you have a 19-year story of sobriety, and I look at the level of success that you've been able to achieve in not one area, but so many areas. And yet everything that you do comes back to the same foundations of what supported you in becoming sober, what supported you in creating this life of health and wellness. And so I would love for you to tell us a little bit of how did you get to where you are today?
I believe in foundation. When you think about any structure, building, house, the ones that stand the test of time are built on a strong foundation. And so I kind of look at life a day at a time. And I was taught that, obviously, as I got sober. You're really, the way you wrap your head around never doing what you've been doing for a long time again is you compartmentalize it into minute by minute, hour by hour, and then ultimately day by day. And so I think of my life as a day. I know I have one day guaranteed. If I open my eyes up in the morning, I have one day guaranteed to put numbers up on the board. I am posed with decisions to make from the second I open my eyes. And it's my job to do my best to make the good ones and try to stave away from allowing my ego or my insecurity to walk the other direction. And so I've really trained myself. August 2nd is the day that I changed my life in 2004, and I was given an opportunity to connect with a couple of men that, for whatever reason, swooped in and truly gave me a plan of success that I had no idea what was to come from this plan that these guys wrote out for me. But basically they told me that if I can get my nutrition and my fitness and then ultimately mindset, mindfulness into my day every day, specifically in the morning, my chances of happiness, freedom, and success were very high. And so these guys, I needed somebody at that time in my life to latch onto. I really did not have a role model. There was no blueprint, for me when I was a kid. It was a pretty rough home situation. I'd been on my own since I was 15. And my sort of medicine at that age was self-prescribed through drugs and alcohol. And so I really ran the streets of New York. I grew up in New York City, making really bad decisions, thinking that they were the right ones. And I just didn't know. But once I, came to terms with death, basically, because I had overdosed, and I knew that it was a do or die for me. I didn't have much longer if I continued to do what I was doing. I made a phone call one morning after a debaucherous 2-week run. And these two guys, I was introduced to these two guys, and they basically said this. This is what they told me to do. And honestly, this is what I do. This is what I did this morning. This is what I do every single day. I've added a bunch of things to it in my morning routine, but the plan that they wrote out for me was wake up as early as you can, get into the bathroom, brush your teeth, floss your teeth, wash your face, put on your contact lenses, and immediately drop down to the floor on your knees and ask God for help. And I'm not a religious guy. I am a very spiritual dude. When I think of God, I think of everything that's not me. Because I know for sure that if I try to play God, which I've done and still creeps up every now and again, if I try to play God, nothing ever goes my way. So they said, ask God for help. And then right after you do that, do some push-ups to move your body. If you can stretch out a little bit, stretch out a little bit, and then immediately put on a pair of sneakers and go outside and walk around. And if that walk is a mile, if that walk is a block, if that walk is a run, we want you to move your body first thing in the morning. And as soon as you get back, have a big bowl of oatmeal and add whatever you want to it. But you need to start putting accessible, easy, healthy nutrition into your body that's going to fuel you for the day. And then right after you do that, go to a sober community meeting, tell everybody that you're a drug addict and an alcoholic, and try to build friendships there. Right after that, go to the gym. We'll meet you there. We're going to train with you for 2 hours or more. And then you're going to have chicken and broccoli for lunch. You're going to take a nap. You're going to go to work. You're going to have chicken and broccoli for dinner, and you're going to try to go to bed as early as you can. And right before you go to bed, just drop on your knees one more time and thank God for helping you stay sober. And so these guys told me to do that. And at that point, I was desperate. And so that's exactly what I did. And they literally held my hand through the process. And very, very quickly did I start to see everything in my life change. And so what did that mean to me, and what does that mean to me today? The decisions that you make in the beginning of your day ultimately paint a picture of what the rest of your day is going to look like. Not 100% guaranteed, but pretty regularly. If you start your day in a slump, you are going to be slumping throughout the rest of the day. And so additionally, what these sort of habits that these guys have started to introduce to me at that age was, you have the ability to control wins. And when we think of the word win, we think of the big ones. The big game, the big exit, the promotion at work, the getting married to the woman or man of your dreams, the big ones. We don't think of the little tiny ones that ultimately stack up, that you have control over, that make the big ones so much easier to achieve. And so I learned that through changing my bad habits to great habits. And I live my life that way. And I know for sure that I'm not unique. Everybody can start implementing some of those things that I did in those days if they're feeling directionless or a bit lost. We have control over winning in our lives. And human beings are conditioned to want to win. Winning feels good. And so if you can eat a bowl of oatmeal instead of a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, chances are you're going to feel better. You're going to feel better. It might not be the instant gratification that you get from taking a bite of a big, juicy bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich. And I'm not saying that you should never have those, but I am saying that the decisions that you make on a regular basis in the beginning of your day ultimately dictate what your life is going to be like. And so that was a long way of saying my habits almost killed me, and now they have developed the man I am. And I'm proud of the guy I am today. And I love myself, and I'm married to the woman of my dreams, and I have 2 wonderful kids that I love dearly, and they actually love me back. They tell me I'm the best dad in the world. And 20 years ago, I could have never, ever dreamed of ever having a child tell me I was the best dad in the world because of what I was, what I thought fatherhood was. So I'm grateful.
I can hear the beauty and the sincerity and the love in your voice as you start to pivot and talk about the successes of what it is that you've created. And I don't want our audience to miss what you just referenced, which is when you start to stack the small little shifts and changes, and you add them up over a period of time, they create profound changes in your life. And we are always looking for what is the big change and not always the small micro adjustments that add up to the monumental change that we see in life. I actually teach a process inside of life and business, which is called priming, which speaks into the science behind what you do in the first 20 minutes of your day, how it alters your life. And I can take that into a company, or I can take it into an individual's life, and it is going to literally alter every chemical in the brain. It's going to alter how they process, emotions in the body. And what you've done essentially is speak into the steps of how you are able to create a shift that sets you up for success for the rest of the day. And so it's just so beautifully done. I want to go back a second because we want to focus in a little bit on the success that you've been able to create. And on August 2nd, having this moment introduced to these two men that create the shift in your life, and they become the examples and create the change. But I'm going to imagine that there were many, many years before that where you tried to create the change and you weren't able to. And so you alluded to it, but I really want to serve someone because I know somebody is listening to this right now that probably drinks too much alcohol. They might not be a full-blown alcoholic, but they can't not have that glass of wine every day or those couple of beers every day, or maybe they're not taking care of their health or their nutrition. And I want to support them in gaining the value out of what it was that you just shared. What was it that day outside of I was desperate? What do you believe was the catalyst that supported you in actually being able to take what you were hearing? Because I would imagine there were many years where people wanted to support you, or people tried to support you, or people gave you help, but you didn't take it. What do you think was the thing that really supported you in that moment? And if you could teach that, how could somebody gain something from that?
It's a good question, and I think it boils down to a few things. A, I was sick and tired of lying to myself. And I was the biggest liar I knew, specifically to myself, because there was never a moment over the last 3 years or 2 years of my using and drinking journey that I didn't, come to somewhere and say I'll never do this again, and then find myself right back to where I was. So today I really stand behind this idea that you have to do what you say you're going to do. Because if you believe that you're a liar, the chances of success are slim. And that morning, I had slept through work for the umpteenth time. My boss, who I love, who really was a catalyst to also helping save my life at that time, fired me and said, "I love you, kid, but I can't watch you do this on my dime. You're going to die. Everybody knows that you're going to die. We talk about it, and it can't happen under my watch, so you gotta go." And so that was a massive shift for me, because my job was really the only thing really tethering me to like some semblance of life. And so I really think what it came down to for me was this idea that I was sick and tired of hating myself, sick and tired of lying, and I needed someone. Potentially I'm that person for somebody listening right now, to tell me that I'm going to be okay, and we are capable of doing anything we put our mind to. And that's what happened. I really do. I had beaten myself up so bad, and I had so much hatred towards myself for a long time. So trying to teach that is hard, I think, right? Like, I think trying to teach that is hard, but I think the lesson that I would try to extrapolate from that is our word is our most valuable asset. Time is obviously very important, but what we say, what comes out of our mouths is one of our most valuable assets, and it's ultimately how people perceive us. And if you can do what you say you're going to do in a positive way, it doesn't matter how hard or how many times you fail. If you can do what you say you're going to do, you've got the world in the palm of your hands. If you can commit to that. I believe today, at almost 44 years old, and I can't believe I'm almost 44 years old. I feel like I'm like 35. But I believe today that I can do whatever I want to do. And if I told you, hey, you know what? I want to be a surgeon. I've come to the conclusion that that's something that really interests me. I know today at 43 years old, I can enroll in school. I'll probably get into a really good one because of my business track record. And I can go to school, I can go to med school, I can do 4 or 5 years in the hospital, and in 15 years from now, I could be doing surgery on people. I believe it 100% if I wanted to do that. And that goes for anything. Obviously, I'm not going to be in the NFL or I'm not playing professional basketball, but maybe I'm not going to go to be an astronaut, but I really do believe that as human beings, we are the only hurdle that stands in our way of our dreams and our goals. And if we understand that, and understand that like it all starts in the decisions that we make in the morning, the sky's the limit.
You beautifully are speaking into leadership qualities which are required to live, a beautiful, robust life. And so many people discredit their words, but on many layers. And you just spoke into that you need to be a man of your word or a person of integrity. And so if you say, I'm going to be somewhere at 8 o'clock, then you need to be there by 8 o'clock. And if you come at 8:05, then essentially you're a liar because you didn't do what you said you were going to do, and people perceive you as a liar. And so another form of value in your words is that every time you say a word, you're casting a spell. And every time you have a word, that word is associated with a thought, because first you had the thought produced an emotion, the thought and the emotion drove the behavior, and the behavior was the word. And so when you say the word, it's the physical manifestation of the thoughts and the emotions. And so if you wake up every day, and you've said it now 3 times on the show, you hated yourself. But what you've also said equally as many times is that you now love yourself, and your kids love you, and you're the greatest dad, and you've got this incredible relationship, and then your eyes, you could see the love in your eyes and your cheeks. And so, that there is genuine love flowing to you and through you. So what would you say to somebody right now that hates themselves, or at least doesn't love themselves at the level that they should? And what would be your advice to really support them in creating that shift, to start to at least build a relationship with themselves, to fall in love with themselves? Because I would say that's probably the single biggest catalyst for the change that you've seen.
This might sound a little woo-woo, but I'm going to go ahead and say it because I know it to be true. Rewrite the fucking story. Rewrite the story. The story that you believe right now. If you're listening to this and you hate yourself, or your confidence is at an all-time low, or you have no, your insecurities tend to dictate whether you speak up or not. It's the story that you told yourself over and over and over again. You can rewrite that story right now. The hard part of rewriting this story is actually doing what the story dictates. And I'm here to tell you that every single successful person on the planet has failed way more than they've won. All of them. They've all failed way more than they've won because they've told themselves a story of success, and success is hard. And I don't mean success financially, although that's a part of it. I mean, when you tell yourself the story of success, you project success into your life by telling yourself that you have what it takes and you can get through the pain. Because if you're listening to this also, you have gotten through every single thing in your life to date. You have gotten through everything. 100%. You're listening to this podcast. You've gotten through everything else. So now let's start rewriting the story. And I believe that we get a chance every single day, right? And if yesterday failed, all good. You got another shot. It's really, and I coach men as well. And one of the greatest values I think these men sort of take away from my coaching experience is I really try to focus on structure and foundation in the beginning of the day, as well as fitness and nutrition. But ultimately, as soon as somebody says I can't, or I don't think, or maybe not, or I just stop them immediately, and I try to bring awareness to their like unbelievable commitment to talking poorly about themselves. it's so much easier for us to say, God, I'm not. There's just no way. That person's so much better, taller, but more handsome, smarter. How can? There's no way. I can't have that house. I can't drive that car. There's no possibility that I'm going to be able to get to that level in my. It rolls off the tongue, rolls like a flowing river on a Sunday spring in Hudson, New York. It's a lot harder to say, no, I have exactly what it takes. I can get through this. I will get through this. I'm going to ask for as much help as possible. I'm going to commit. I'm going to do it 100%. No one is stopping me. No one is going to stop me from getting where I want to go. That is a lot harder conversation and a far more rare conversation than the ones that we have about the I'm nots and I can'ts. So I believe it's a story.
You just said that it sounds a little woo woo. And for anybody that's listening, woo woo is where I live. But I love to bring the science into the woo woo. And there's actual scientific data that reinforces that when you go back and rewrite a story from the past and you change the memory of how you remember a scene or an environment, that it actually creates a change. And so I want you to think about the value of you taking a moment to rewrite your story of whatever that is. I have a memory of being, 7 or 8 years old and a bunch of kids bullied me in school and I broke my trust with all of them and I didn't want to be friends with them again and I realized my friends could hurt my feelings. And years later, went back in a meditative state, rewrote the story to me being the hero in the story, meaning not allowing them to control my emotions and me being like, you guys are silly and letting it go. But it actually changes how you show up in your life because your brain is now altering where it connects, to information when you're making decisions in real time. And people discredit the value of that because 95% of all of your emotions are triggers from your past. And it's reminding you of who you were, and then you're making decisions from that vantage point in who you are now. So I love so much that you brought that forward into the episode today. So you created a company, Creatures of Habit, and you've spoken all episode now for the last 20 odd minutes around habits. And I would love for you to speak into a little bit about why did you start that? I mean, you've got two thriving restaurants. You've got, for anyone that doesn't know, 2 seasons as the host of Food Porn. You've worked with some of the biggest restaurateurs in the world. You've got a thriving life in so many areas. And yet now you wanted to focus in on how you can support people to create better habits. And it's focused in on the nutrition and all of the steps essentially of what you gave us of what was the catalyst for your change. Speaking to a little bit about, what it is you're wanting to create and where do you see it going?
I believe happiness comes from decision making, period. Happiness is decision making. Over and over and over again, making the same decisions. They become, at first, it's a task. That task could be nagging, but ultimately, if you continue and you commit and you really dive into consistency, that task becomes a habit, and then ultimately, over time, that habit becomes your lifestyle. My habits saved my life. The good ones, the ones that I started making years ago, and I know that I'm on this earth to tell my story and be of service. Like, I believe that. And I'm confident in it. I'm good at it. I really believe that I am here to help people potentially change their lives, make better decisions, and live a life beyond their wildest dreams, because that's my story. And again, right, like, I'm not, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I literally have built from the ground up, from the depths of addiction. And so I believe that by creating the business Creatures of Habit, and it's interesting, so Creatures of Habit, we sell nutritional habits. We sell nutritional healthy habits. And the product that we launched with is something called Meal One, which is a high protein overnight oatmeal. Why did I launch a high protein overnight oatmeal after opening 13 restaurants in New York City successfully and exiting successfully? Why did I go from New York City crazy restaurateur guy to wellness CPG oatmeal guy? Because when I got when my life changed, when I changed my life, those guys told me to eat oatmeal every morning. And I've been eating oatmeal every single morning from that day, literally. And I've added a bunch of things to it. And when I sold equity in my last restaurant concept, Seymour's, in 2019, I, had a nice cushion and a base financially. And I said, I'm going to take some time and I'm going to really think about what my next move is. And I knew that it had to align with my passion and by the way, my existence because of wellness. And I was on a run. I had moved my family out of Brooklyn. When the pandemic hit, we moved from Brooklyn to upstate New York, is where I live right now. And I was on a run. It was beautiful. It was the summertime. I live in one of the most beautiful places in the country. And I was like, what the heck am I going to do? And I'd been working with an executive coach to try to help me navigate sort of pivoting my career, because obviously in the pandemic, I wasn't going to open up another restaurant. And it just all came to me. I said, I find the most gratitude when I work with young sober dudes or young addicts that are trying to get sober, and I can be an example of success to them. Someone who was sitting right next to them on the street corner using heroin or cocaine or over drinking or whatever drug is your fancy, and have come out of that and has now created this life. And really, I was like, what can I do? Like, how can I put an emphasis on wellness and then me being able to tell my story? And then it just came to me. I was like, man, I've been eating this oatmeal every single day for years and years. It's the first thing I put into my body. I have it no matter where I go. It unfortunately was taking me like 20 minutes to make every morning. And I was like, if I can figure out a way to get all the things that I put into this oatmeal that I make, plus my supplements, into a pouch, I can not only have a cool business that gives you an amazing way to start your day, decision making, specifically with nutrition, but I could tell my story. And I got home from that run. I told my wife what I was going to do. She rolled her eyes at me and thought I was absolutely out of my mind. And she's like, "What? You're going to sell oatmeal?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to sell oatmeal. That's what I'm going to do." And I began the process. And in that oatmeal, it's an overnight oats. So, we have gluten and glyphosate-free oats. It's got 30 grams of plant-based protein. It's got chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, some pink Himalayan salt for electrolytes. It's got vitamin D3, omega-3 fatty acids, a probiotic, and digestive enzymes. It takes 30 seconds to make the night before. You put it in the fridge, and you pull it out in the morning, and it's ready to go. You do nothing. So it's a very, very easy way to kickstart your day with making good nutritional decisions. And when you really think about nutrition, when you think about food and beverage, there's nothing more intimate than food and beverage with the human body, right? It goes into your body metabolizes it, and ultimately builds your being. It is you. What you are, the age-old saying, you are what you eat, is like not a lie. It's not just like a funny tagline. It's true. So once you begin to develop a great relationship with your nutrition and you feel good about it, you're like, man, I eat well. There's a peace of mind that comes with that. That is a massive win. And so, Creatures of Habit came from the silly idea that I had on a run. I built a brand around it. I pitched it to Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a friend of mine. I said, what do you think of this? And he immediately wrote me a check as the first investor in. And then we raised money and we did it. Now, we sell millions of dollars of oatmeal. And it's amazing. And it's just, we've just scratched the surface of the business and the brand, and we'll have a few other products. We launched another product called Nightcap, which is a sleep support hot chocolate that really helps you relax, fall, and stay asleep naturally without using melatonin, because melatonin is kind of like a slippery slope for me. I was like using melatonin and felt like, man, I'm becoming reliant on this stuff. Like, I don't want to be reliant on something. And so I spent a year working on this Nightcap product, and that's out there now. So you start your day with meal one, you finish your day with Nightcap. They're really delicious, and it really has given me, like, I'm on your podcast right now to tell my story, and my story has been able to, I've been able to amplify my story enormously through the brand of Creatures of Habit.
So I love so much that you've spoken into a little bit of the success that you've been able to achieve in, taking what was a a struggle for you and the pain, and I want to go back there for a second, but I want the audience to understand why. You know, I look at where you are now, and I look at what you're doing today, and I look at the level of success that you've achieved. And success is, you know, the loving relationship, the two beautiful kids that love you and think you're the best dad in the world, and you feeling that you love you and you're the best dad, and then having abundance and flow and opportunity, and then creating something that's adding value out in the world, because so many people are looking to just make money and they're not necessarily looking at how can they create an impact. And you've bridged your personal life, you've bridged your struggles, and then you've bridged your passion, which is bringing nutrition as the center cornerstone to everything that was the catalyst for the change that you created. And I know that there's going to be somebody that's listening to this episode that is in that struggle. And for them, it might not be drugs, it might not be alcohol, it could be something else. But you're simplifying such a difficult process into, well, I just woke up in the mornings and had my oatmeal. And I believe it is that simple, because it's the stacking of these really small successes. But I want somebody to listen to this and see themselves in you. And so if you don't mind, I'd love you to go back to the 15-year-old version of you that was by himself. What was some of the pain and the struggle that you went through that caused you to numb yourself through alcohol and drug addiction? And the reason I'm asking that question is because I want people to recognize the power in what you're saying and what your life represents. And that if you can create the routine of get up out of your bed, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, floss, drop down to your knees, pray, do these simple things, and then have your oatmeal and then start your day. Like, this is what's going to create the shift. But I would love to bridge the gap of what were some of the struggles, the internal dialogue that you were fighting. And then how did the oatmeal, so to speak, support you in overcoming that limiting belief that you have? Because I know that you speak into adversity is a real thing. I know that you speak into, pain and struggles are real, but you also believe in replacing bad habits with good habits. But there needs to be that inner dialogue, the one that said, I hate myself, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and I'm going to take drugs and alcohol to, fix that, numb that, to now today you wake up empowered, inspired, motivated to create an impact. And I think we kind of need to understand the bridge a little bit of how did your routine really support you in overcoming the thoughts that were the dialogue?
It's really interesting. People think of addicts as like useless, irresponsible wastes of space, just degenerate people. But really, at the end of the day, and in some cases, yes, in some cases, yes, there are, a fair amount of that out there. However, when you really think of an addict, they're some of the most loyal and responsible and diligent and committed to the drugs and the alcohol. And if drugs and alcohol is not your thing, the food and the gambling and the shopping and the hoarding, you're unbelievably committed. I'm talking about you would jump in front of a bullet. That's how committed you are to the drugs. And so it's very interesting that it's an archetype of human that is capable of doing that, right? Like, very few people will do that, and addicts are part of that very few that have become so committed, also known as addicted, to a substance. When I was 15 years old, I had come through a lot already in my life. I had a very abusive father, super abusive. My father at 15 years old and we were throwing fists at each other for a number of years at that point. It was, he was a sick human, and I've come to terms with him, and he's dead a long time now, but I hated my father, and he never said anything nice to me. And so I had built this story about myself that I suck and I was going to amount to nothing, and I believed it. And so the drugs at that stage in my life were really the only thing that I had access to that stopped me from having those feelings, that gave me confidence, that built some sort of a shell or a force field around my mind to think of how terrible of a human I was. And when I was not on the drugs, I hated myself. And, I'd also been sexually molested by a sports coach at a young age that also really, confused me, and it was traumatic, and I've come to terms with that too in sobriety, right? I was in a mental institution at 12 because I sliced my wrists open in front of my father, thinking that he was going to save me, or give me a hug, tell me he loved me, tell me he was sorry. And he beat the shit out of me with blood pouring out of my wrists. So I went through a lot at a young age, and by the time I was 15, I felt like I had experienced like lives of many, and I was forced to understand what it meant to be on my own, because I knew that if like being in my house and in my apartment any longer was unsafe, for real, unsafe. And my mother was terrified too for her life. So that's why my mother said, I understand, you got to go, you got to go. And so it didn't get any better for me though. It got a lot worse. I mean, I became not only a drug user, but a drug dealer. And I was hanging out with really, really bad people. And, I'd gotten a gun shoved in my mouth and pistol whipped and duct taped and tied up and robbed and all sorts of crazy things that I can't even, it's like a movie, like a true movie. And I didn't know what, I blamed my childhood most of the time, for all the things that was happening. And now I know that it had nothing to do with my childhood, because I am a living, breathing human being, and I have the ability to make decisions. And yes, did my childhood influence the decisions I made? For sure. But I have to hold myself accountable for every decision I make in my life, unless I have a gun to my head, which I've had. But most of the time we don't. And we have to hold ourselves accountable for the decisions that we make. And, I spent from really 12, 13 to 23, the end of my 23rd year, just making really bad decisions and, overdosing on heroin. And just, it really sends chills down my spine to go back to, the day that I, saw my reflection in a mirror. I was naked. I saw the reflection of myself in the mirror. I was white as a ghost, paper white from head to toe. My arms, my chest, my stomach, everything was white. And I said, that's it. I'm dying. I'm going to die right now. I know it. I felt it. I felt like this was it. And I overdosed. And the woman that I was with was terrified. And I remember kind of coming to and saying, call the ambulance. And she didn't want to call the ambulance. She was scared because there was drugs in the house. And so she dragged me over to the bathroom and threw me in the bathtub face up and turned on the cold water. And I remember being in that bathtub with the cold water splashing me in the face and thinking that I was dying. And like, how could I have let this happen? Like, how could I have gone down this dark road? How could I have gone this far without a flashlight? Like, how? And 2 weeks later, I rewrote the story. So I think, we get so committed to the things that make us feel good, or so we think, when we're an addict or when we're feeling lost and using substances or some sort of bad activity to take us out of our own heads. And the truth is that those reliances are breakable. There is another way. It might not be fun or easy in the beginning, but replacing bad habits with great habits changes your life a lot faster than you could ever imagine if you're sitting in the bad habit seat right now. Like, so much faster. So much faster than you would think. And I'm not going to sit here and candy coat it and say it's an easy thing to do. You're going to have to get through, the DTs or detox, and you're going to have to fight through those first few weeks of really understanding that, this is not your life anymore. But I'm a living, breathing example of someone who's done it, who was at the bottom of the barrel. I'm talking about the bottom, you know? I mean, I wasn't like a dirty, you know, non-showering, um, you know, homeless person on the Bowery. But I had friends that were, and a lot of them are dead. 75% of my friends from childhood and who I was out there running the streets with are dead. I get a call at least once a year that another one is gone, you know. So I guess the routine, you know, people break my chops a lot about how important my morning routine is. I've been doing the morning routine thing way before cold plunging every morning was a cool thing to do. You know, like cold plunging became part of my morning routine, but I had a structured morning routine in 2004. And that's because I knew that, and these guys, this is not something I came up with on my own, you know, literally God sent these guys in my path, and these guys taught me that, you know, you have to set yourself up for success through discipline. And right now, I mean, I've got discipline equals freedom tattooed on my hand because I know how important structure and foundation is for success. And when I say success, I just want to make sure everybody understands it's not about the car I drive, the home I live in, the bank account, although that is awesome stuff and definitely a byproduct of living a fulfilled, happy life. But it's about how I feel about myself right now. That is success. That is success. How do I feel about myself right now? And there's moments throughout my day where I'm super successful, and then of course I'm human, right? There's times where I'm like, man, I'm not feeling successful right now, you know, and that's okay too. But we are capable of doing anything we want to do, and you don't have to be an addict or, you know, an alcoholic to do that either, right? Like this goes for everyone. How you set yourself up, right? Like I think about the morning as, man, I'm a racehorse. I've got fire. I've got engine. I've got testosterone. I'm at the gate, like everybody's watching, you know. And then all of a sudden, boom, that gate opens up. If I want to win the race, I am gonna fucking fly out the gate. I'm gonna fly. But if you don't set yourself up and you don't see that little stone in front of you and you trip right out the gate, no shot. No chance. Those horses are gone. You are not catching up. Promise you that. So set yourself up. Don't trip on the rock. There's rocks everywhere. You know, there's rocks everywhere. Set yourself up over and over and over again. You know, you know, like there's this like the 10,000 hour rule and the Kobe Bryant, you know, like Steph Curry, like these guys had just said, I would be out on the court at 4:00 in the morning and I'd get 500 shots in before my team even showed up. And that might sound boring. You're going to shoot 500 shots, the same thing over and over again. Every one of those shots makes you better. Every one. One shot better. one shot better. And so I believe in that at my core, you know, and that's how my life changed.
You know, I love so much how your response has tied into everything that you've said throughout the entire show today. My favorite thing that you said was your definition of success is how you feel about yourself. And I do think that that is by far the greatest answer that I've ever had in response to success, because everybody has a different opinion of what success is. But at the end of the day, how you feel about you should mean more to you than anything and everything in the world, because it's tied to everything that you've been doing and everything that you're going to do. I think that was just such a beautiful way to summarize, you know, the act of doing the work and creating the change. I'd asked you that question because I've heard parts of your story and I wanted the audience to see how bad it can get and how good it can be, and to see the difference of the bridge, because somebody could have heard, well, I just started dropping to my knees, praying, eating oatmeal, you know, here's the things that I was doing, and be like, well, that sounds too simple, and not applying the principle or the formula to their life. I was on a phone call just yesterday with a client, and there's somebody in their life that is very near and dear to them who has not been classified an alcoholic, but they'll every few weeks go on a bender for 3, 4, 5 days, and it's horrendous, and then pick up the pieces and come back. And the question was asked, like, how do you create that structure? Because how is it possible you can have 3 great weeks and then have 5 really bad days, and then have 2 great months and then 2 bad weeks, and like, how do you create that shift? And your response today was just so beautiful, because it's every single morning. If you were to start exactly the same way, put your best foot forward and wait for the gate to open and be ready to take the steps that are going to take you to where it is that you want to go. And if you were to follow them religiously, you're going to be met with the end result significantly more times than you would be any other way. And your life is an example of that. So I just want to thank you for coming on the Empowered Life podcast. I want to thank you for pouring into our audience. I know that everybody, regardless of where they are, what they're doing, where they're going, can gain tremendous value from you and just how you show up. I'm going to encourage people to follow you, subscribe to what you're doing, to listen to your podcast. I jumped on and listened to a little bit of your last episode and loved again the value of how you speak into just nutrition, which is what I was listening to, and how important that shows up in our life. And so I want to encourage everybody to go over to your website. I'm going to drop your information into the show notes. But what is the best way for people to find you, follow you, or learn a little bit more about how they can interact with you?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. This is like, I'm kind of living I'm doing what I said I was going to do by coming on this podcast and being able to tell my story. So thank you so much for being hospitable and having me and hosting me. If you want to follow along my journey, I'm at Michael Chernow pretty much everywhere. Instagram predominantly, like that's a great way to follow along. I'm very active there. And I share tips and all sorts of things on fitness and nutrition. I share products that I love using to help me optimize my life. I also have a podcast, the Creatures of Habit podcast. So that's Creatures with a K. You can listen to that podcast. We drop an episode every single week. I love doing the podcast. And then, of course, if you want to, partake in the business Creatures of Habit, we sell some great products that can really help you kickstart your day and sort of finish in a nice, relaxing way. So creaturesofhabit.com with a K, and you can check us out there, and we're doing some cool stuff, and we got a lot of cool people involved with the business and the brand, and we're building a really powerful brand and community. So that would be the way.
You had me sold at 30 seconds to make my morning oatmeal. And so, yes, I will most certainly be taking advantage of that. Michael, thank you so much for pouring into our audience. Thank you for being the incredible human being that you are, and for pouring love and light out into the world. To our audience, I want to just turn to you for a moment and just say thank you for investing in you. Thank you for listening to somebody else's story, taking something from what they've gone through to apply it to your life. Michael is an example of what does it look like to live a life in your purpose, in your power, and to live a life that's built on the foundations of joy, fulfillment, freedom, and to do it with abundance in anything and everything. And you can do it too. If you found something in this episode that you just resonated with, that you loved, I'm going to ask you to please post it, share it, tag somebody that you think might value from hearing something that was shared on this episode. But more than anything, I just want to see you on another episode. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode. We love you guys. Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.